improvement of student learning. We're very happy that we have 111 people registered for our presentation today, which is a great indication, I think, of the importance of this topic. So thank each of you for your interest, and we're very, very pleased to have you in attendance today. My name is Ray Van Dyke, and I am here today in a couple of roles. First, I am Executive Director of the Center for Efficacy in Higher Education, a nonprofit organization which promotes and supports institutions that are actively engaged in creating and implementing strategies that lead to authentic improvement of student learning. Additionally, as Senior Vice President at Centriva, I'm happy to join my colleagues here in sponsoring this series of webinars. As many of you know, Centriva is the parent company of a number of software tools, including Weave Online and Academic Effect, which help institutions manage their institutional effectiveness processes. Before introducing you to today's presenter, I want to mention several points of information. First, if you have questions during the presentation, we ask that you write your question in the message area on the control panel that should be on your screen. Your questions, after Keston has finished his talk, I will then ask him as many of the questions as we have time for and have him respond. And so hopefully we'll be able to get to all of or most of those questions. I also want you to know that when you sign out of the webinar today, you will see a brief survey that will give us, allow you to give us feedback on our presentation. And we really do value your thoughts and opinions and encourage you to please respond to that survey so that we can continue to offer informative and meaningful webinars for you. And finally, as the final point, you will all receive an email message after the webinar today that will include links to Keston's PowerPoint presentation and some other related materials. So with that said, let's get going with today's webinar. I am honored to have the opportunity to introduce today's speaker, Dr. Keston Fulcher. Keston is the Executive Director of the Center for Assessment and Research Studies and an Associate Professor at James Madison University. Previously, he served as the Director of Assessment, Evaluation, and Accreditation at Christopher Newport University in Newport News. And before that, he oversaw assessment, institutional research, and planning activities at Eastern Shore Community College. Additionally, he's been actively engaged in the broader assessment community in higher education by providing his expertise and service to numerous organizations such as the Virginia Assessment Group, where he served as president, and as well as other offices, and also has made many contributions to SAC-COC and its member institutions. Of great interest to Keston these days is his research focusing on structuring higher education to better demonstrate learning improvement. And that is exactly what he's going to be talking with us, to us about today. Keston is a very highly valued colleague and friend of mine, and I know that you are going to enjoy his talk today. So with that, I will turn it over to you, Keston.
Great. Thanks so much, Ray. And everybody in attendance, thanks so much for tuning in. And we're going to talk about my favorite topic in the world, and that's learning improvement. The first question I often get asked is, Keston, what is with that title? Weigh pig, feed pig, weigh pig. Where does that come from? Well, it actually comes from the terminology used in the old farm market, and they had an expression, and it's this: a pig never fattened because it was weighed. So the idea is you'd want to bring a pig to the market, and you'd hope that pig would weigh as much as possible because you got paid by the pound for how much that pig weighed. But if you kept putting the pig on the scale over and over and over again, that pig's not going to weigh anymore. You actually have to feed something to that pig in between the weighings for it to weigh more. And we essentially took that analogy and applied that to student learning outcomes assessment in higher ed. What we do in higher ed often is we assess students over and over and over again, but we don't do anything differently in between. We don't apply interventions to help those students learn more. So that's basically the idea behind weigh pig, feed pig, weigh pig, and plus I just like pigs in general. Also, you might notice that I've got a comic book up there, Porky Pig. So just behind student learning outcomes and improvement, my second passion is comic books. So you may see another comic book again in this presentation. Okay, before I talk about my 4 main points, and these points are these. One is, where are we with respect to learning improvement nationally? Second, why does improvement matter? Third, why don't we see more learning improvement? And then finally, what are some strategies that you can apply and that we can apply to make learning improvement better across the nation? Before I get to that, let me give a few thanks. So I want to thank my co-authors to the PIG paper. So the first is Megan Rogers-Good. She's at Auburn University now. Chris Coleman, he's at the University of Alabama. And then the final co-author is Kristen Smith. She's a second-year doctoral student at James Madison University's Assessment and Measurement PhD program. I'd also like to give a shout-out to our faculty development experts. And at JMU, our faculty development office is called the Center for Faculty Innovation. And something that we found out at our assessment office at JMU is that we had a lot of assessment expertise, but we didn't have much expertise in curriculum and pedagogy. So that's sort of the way, the feeding the pig part we didn't have. But these are experts in that area in faculty development. So we decided to join forces with them. And so Carol Herney and Karen Meixner are those folks. And finally, I want to give special thanks to the man behind the scenes, Ray Van Dyke. As Ray mentioned, we've been friends and colleagues for a long time. I've known him for about 10 years. And about a year ago, we started seriously talking about this issue of a lack of learning improvement in higher ed. So we've been partnering together to try to figure out how we can get the word out about learning improvement. And the main issue is this. People talk about building a culture of assessment. We'd like to reframe that conversation or evolve that conversation to be, we want to create a culture of learning improvement. Assessment still plays a very, very important role in that conversation, but it's not all about assessment. It's about using assessment in a bigger picture of learning improvement across the nation. Okay, so let's go back to learning improvement. So the question is, where are we in the United States with respect to learning improvement? Trudy Bonta and some of her colleagues back in 2009 wrote a paper. They essentially asked institutions across the nation, send us your best assessment reports. And as a result, they got about 150 reports back. What they found was only 6% of those assessment reports actually demonstrated learning improvement. So that was 9 out of 150 reports. That's pretty humble in and of itself. But let's not forget, that wasn't a random sample of assessment reports. That was the best assessment report from about 150 different institutions. So that 6% is a vast overestimation of how much learning improvement we're observing in higher ed. Another study was done by Bleich and Wise, and they're part of the Wabash group. And so they had a hypothesis. They said, if we just had better methodology, better instrumentation, better tests, better data collection design, if we just could give institutions those things, then they would surely take that information and apply action to it and make their programs better. Unfortunately, they didn't find that. Even with a top-tier methodology, folks still weren't using assessment results. The point here is the answer to learning improvement does not solely rest with assessment. And finally, Bonta and Bleich combined forces together, and they were asked to write an article by Peg Miller. Peg Miller is the editor of Change magazine. And Peg said, Charlie, Trudy, can y'all write an article for me about learning improvement? I want you to find the best examples in the nation, figure out what they're doing well, and write an article about it. Unfortunately, they couldn't find enough examples across the nation to write this article. So instead of writing a learning improvement article, they wrote an article about obstacles to learning improvement. So these 3 papers really paint a bad picture for learning improvement across the nation. But let me turn this inwards to JMU. So how's learning improvement at JMU? At JMU, we have a lot of assessment resources. We've got a PhD program in assessment and measurement. We've got 10 faculty members who work on assessment. We've got about 15 graduate students. And one of the things we're interested in is to evaluate how well we do assessment. And so we, the faculty and staff at JMU and some graduate students, read all the assessment reports we received across the university, and we evaluated those assessment reports on the different steps of the assessment cycle. Some folks call this meta-assessment, if you will. And over 7 years, after providing a lot of support to faculty and staff, what we found is that assessment improved in every aspect of the assessment process except, you got it, using results for improvement. And this really made me sad because I want to be in a position to help programs get better, yet I was finding that programs just weren't demonstrating a lot of learning improvement. And that said, over the last 20 years, we do have a few examples of learning improvement. It's just not nearly as many as we would hope for. So the next question is this. Well, why does improvement matter? Well, a couple different ways. Many of you in attendance are probably coordinators of assessment at your own universities. And my guess is, as you talk to people about assessment, you sell it as something that can be beneficial to programs to help students learn better. Another piece to why improvement matters is, funny enough, is actually accountability. A lot of people make a distinction between accountability and improvement. But if you actually look at, say, the regional accreditors and you look at their standards, they want you to apply assessment that leads to learning improvement. So the spirit is actually improvement as well. And finally, when I work with programs, they just have more interest to say, you know, how does this benefit me? And so all of those are reasons that improvement matters. So I made the argument that we're not doing very well as a nation in learning improvement, nor are we doing it very well at JMU. I've also made the argument that it's pretty daggone important. So the next logical question then is, why don't we see more learning improvement? There's a few reasons. The first I'll talk about is this issue of definition. So the question is, what is learning improvement? And this surprised me, but people talk about that term so differently. And so something that we had heard is people think that learning improvement is making a change to the assessment process. So for example, you have a program, 100 students are graduating, and you're trying to sample students from that 100. And for whatever reason, you're only able to get 5 students to take a particular test. Well, that's a concern. Your data collection process wasn't very good. Your sample's too small. It's probably unrepresentative. And so the next year what you say is, we're going to make our sampling technique better. We're going to assess all 100 students as opposed to 5. Well, that's good. That helps you do better data collection, a more representative sample. But having a better sampling design is not going to make students learn better. This one's trickier. People make statements like, oh, I made a change to my program. I made a curricular change or a pedagogical modification. And because I made these changes, this is an improvement. Well, not so much, and I'm going to tell you why. So let me put this big cross across these two bad definitions of learning improvement, and I'm going to run through an example with you to show you what learning improvement might be. Okay, so let's go with this hypothetical example. Imagine this is a history program, and one of their student learning outcomes at the program level is for students to be better writers. Also in this hypothetical example, please bear with me. For the sake of argument, imagine that the methodology is perfect. So we're not concerned about methodology. We're not concerned about how good the test is or how good the sampling design is. We know it's perfect. Okay, so going back to this example, this program is evaluating student writing, and they're evaluating seniors. And what they find is students' average writing score on a 4-point rubric is 2.5. And the rubric has the following points on a scale. 1 is beginning, 2 developing, 3 good, and 4 exemplary. So in essence, this 2.5 suggests that students' writing is somewhere between developing and good. Well, the faculty aren't very happy with that because they're thinking, geez, these are students that are graduating from our history program. We'd like them to be at good or beyond, but they're merely at 2.5 or somewhere between developing and good. So in response to that, they create a new writing curriculum. You know, way to go. They responded to those results. They actually made a change, did action. But what I would suggest at that point, it is only a change. we don't know if students are actually writing better as a function of that new writing curriculum. So imagine that same example. They reassess graduating seniors in 2017 after that writing program has had a chance to fully unfold, and they find out that students are now writing at a 3.5 level. So now they're between good and exemplary. They bumped up a full point. So at this point, we can say this change is an improvement. That's a very important part of this webinar. And that's for us to make that distinction between a change and improvement. A change only becomes an improvement after you do a reassessment and you show that that change leads to better student learning outcomes. And it also relates to our weigh pig, feed pig, weigh pig again. Okay, so we just talked about the definitional issue. So hopefully we've got a little bit more clarity on that, about what learning improvement means. Now let's talk about one of the reasons that we don't see more learning improvement, and those are methodological shortcomings. So in my other example, I said, we're in fantasy land here, let's pretend there's no methodological issues, everything's perfect. Now I want to acknowledge some of those methodological issues. So if you don't have a pre-assessment and or you don't have a post-assessment, by definition, you can't evidence learning improvement. Another methodological issue is that you may have unproven instruments. So maybe the test you use or the rubric that you use just isn't that good. And so, in fact, students' proficiency may be getting better, but your instrument's just not good enough to detect that. A third concern is unrepresentative sampling. Maybe you're just not sampling the students right. You could have incorrect analyses, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So at JMU, we're known for being pretty technical with assessment. So we have a lot of analyses, a lot of measurement expertise. But oftentimes when we talk about assessment and learning improvement, we get bogged down with these questions, and we never go beyond that. It's just, hey, if not seeing learning improvement, it must be because the test was bad, because the sampling wasn't good, et cetera, et cetera. Well, there are some other reasons besides methodology that we might not see learning improvement. So what I want you to do, again, is take off your methodology hat. And I want you to think about the program. So let's say it's a history program that you're working with. And let's assume that we have perfect methodology. What are some reasons that we may not see learning improvement? So think about the faculty. Think about the structure of the program. So I'm going to be quiet for about a minute or two, and in your little text entry box on your screen, just type in some things that might be shortcomings to learning improvement on the side of the program. So I'll give you about a minute, and then we'll start talking again. Okay, folks are starting to respond a little bit. Okay, just a couple more seconds and we'll go back on. Okay, the results are coming in. Okay, a few things that we're seeing. One is 85% say that faculty and staff lack time to think about how to use results for improvement. Completely agree with that. There's also the issue, about 41% of you said that faculty don't get along. And right, you have to have a coordinated effort to see learning improvement within a program. It's a very good point there. Another issue is about half of you said that learning improvement is not incentivized. And then about 68% of you said that faculty lack training, and about another half is apathy. So it seems like a lot of those issues that we've seen at our own institution and across other institutions resonate with you as well as being obstacles to learning improvement. And the number one piece, though, is just a lack of time, right? We're not really structuring higher ed very well to give people time to strategize to do a better job of learning improvement. So anyway, thanks so much for sharing some of the shortcomings that you've seen. And by the way, I am such an optimist. I really do think that we can do better. We can overcome many of these obstacles. So let me get back to the presentation here, and let me point out to you a very subtle but important problem. And this is a problem that I've been in assessment for about 15 years, and it was only about 3 years ago that I realized this was a problem. And so I'm going to call it a level problem, and that is there's two levels I want to talk about. One's the program level. And so most of the academic degree programs, or all the academic degree programs we have, consist of many different courses that lead to that degree. So if you're a student, you have to take 15, 20 different courses in order to get your degree, as long as you pass all those courses. On the other end is a course level. So you take one of those courses from a program, and that's often what the faculty care about the most. They teach in a particular course, and in fact, in large institutions, there's usually not just a course, but there's several sections in that particular course. So here's where the level problem comes in. So when we do assessment, at least my office, and most offices, institutional assessment, we often do assessment at the program level. Now, what's good about that is that we are looking at how effective the overall program is in helping students receive certain student learning outcomes. So the level's good. What I often hear from faculty is to say, Keston, okay, I get that you're doing program level assessment and you're helping us with this, but how does that relate back to my individual course, to my individual section? There's a big disconnect there. So on the other hand, when faculty think about their own section and they want to get help with that, they often go to a faculty development office if the institution has a faculty development office. And there with the faculty developers, they learn how to do better pedagogy, better curriculum, and oftentimes faculty feel that they become much better teachers. The problem there, though, is relative to an entire program and all the students who graduate from a program, one section of one course is merely a drop in the bucket related to making those program level learning improvement or program level learning outcomes better. So what we see here are complementary problems, but also complementary strengths of these two groups. So one of the things that we've been working on at JMU is to combine forces, if you will. So to compensate for each other's weaknesses, and in the areas where we're strong, really help shine. And so we're trying to get all those pieces together. So anyway, something else that I want to ask you to do is think about how you have assessment and faculty development organized at your institution. And the more those two groups can work together, I think it's much better for programs. Okay, so now we're going from problems or issues to strategies that we as a nation can do to make learning improvement better, but also your own institution. Number one, define learning improvement and be consistent with how you talk about learning improvement at your own institution. The most important distinction there is between a change and an improvement. So make sure that you're clear about that with your fellow colleagues, administrators, and faculty within your institutions. Number two is make improvement a university level priority. At many institutions, they're starting to make assessment a priority at the institution. That's good, but we need to move to the next level. How do you actually make the programs better? How can assessment interface with the rest of the university to make learning improvement better? Next is campus collaborations. Again, I will talk about my ignorance a few years ago. I really thought in my heart of hearts, if I did a great job in the assessment office, that programs would help their students learn better and they would get better. But I failed at that. And why I failed at that is that I wasn't conceptualizing the problem correctly. The assessment office cannot do it by itself, nor should it. And so what you need to have is a team of people working together. The nucleus is actually the faculty within a program. They need to focus on a learning outcome that's important to them, and you need to have not just one person in that program, but all the faculty in that program committed to wanting to make that better. If you don't have that commitment from the faculty, then you have very little chance, despite any other resources, of actually making learning improvement occur. So some of the best partners I have in this process are faculty leaders who work with their other faculty and they say, hey, we mobilized, we're serious, we actually want to have students write better. Keston, we will offer our content expertise, but we need help with assessment. We need help with some of these faculty development issues. If you give me that nucleus of faculty who really care, who want to do better, then all of a sudden, okay, I can activate the powers that I have within my office to help you out, to make learning improvement better. So the faculty nucleus, number one. Number two, and I mentioned this before, faculty developers. I'm a faculty member. I had very little training in curriculum and pedagogy going into academia, despite that being a major role of what I do, despite teaching. And what I found is that's not unusual. Most faculty do not get much training in pedagogy and curriculum. They're really smart folks. Most of them really care about learning, but very few of them actually have training in it. So faculty development offices that have that expertise in pedagogy and curriculum, they are so important to that partnership. The last piece that I want to mention, or next to last piece I want to mention, is administration. What I'm talking about, having faculty and assessment and faculty development all work together, that requires a lot of coordination and it requires resources. So administrators from the provost level, the dean level, even the president, they have to be on board to say, hey, we need to make this happen. The final piece that I almost forgot to say, my students would kill me if I didn't say it, was to have students on that team as well. And I hadn't thought about it this way, but if you're thinking about a program and what happens in the program, no faculty member actually experiences the entire program. A student, on the other hand, starts at the very beginning classes, takes all the classes, hits a lot of professors, and goes through the complete system of classes that constitute a program. So they can give you this perspective on how things are fitting and not fitting together that faculty, assessment people, and faculty development people just don't have. So anyway, I just want to give a special nod out. It's good to have students on that team as well. Another piece, and this goes back to administrators, is just that innovative incentives for faculty and staff. Many of you all mentioned that time was the biggest obstacle to learning improvement, and I completely agree with you on that. And so one thing that we've done in a couple of pilot programs we've had is we've actually paid faculty over the summer to spend a week together, a complete week together, 40 hours, and the idea is to strategize across the program how they'll make a particular student learning outcome better and how to get the curriculum and pedagogy lined up with it. Now, all the work wasn't completed in 40 hours, but they had a great strategy and they started working on assignments that were specifically related to that student learning outcome that they wanted to improve. And they also knew what everybody else was doing. So anyway, the idea is that there needs to be some incentives and strategies for faculty and staff. Okay, another piece of this is strategic external partnerships. Something else that I was pretty naive about, I didn't realize how important it was to nail down that student learning outcome and really unpack it. So a program might say, we want to get better at critical thinking. You can't just leave it there, better at critical thinking. You really have to explore what critical thinking means to that faculty and come up with some type of consensus before you go down that route of improvement. Too often we say, hey, let's improve critical thinking without a common idea about what it is. Why I say that is this is a great place to bring in external partners. So for some of the groups that we're working with, piloting with, some of the faculty, we've actually brought in outside experts to comment on that construct. So whether it be writing or critical thinking or what have you. So external partnerships can help. So let me talk about if we were to succeed. Again, I'm an optimist. I believe that we can do that. I believe any institution in the nation has got at least one program that's ready to go down that path of learning improvement. So what happens if we succeed? So first, superior student learning. That is number one. We do a lot of things in colleges and universities, but to me it's hard to argue that student learning isn't the number one thing that we do. Number two, and this is what I learned from my faculty development colleagues, positive faculty outcomes. Those faculty who spent a week together strategizing about how as a program they can get students to do better on the student learning outcome, I can't tell you how happy they were, how much they learned about their colleagues, how much they felt that they were part of a team and belonged to a team. It was amazing to see that reaction. Better accountability. In our region, SAC-COC, they would just love to see more examples of learning improvement. Not only did you help the students, but all the accreditors are super happy as well. And finally, it's improved higher education. We can be more strategic. We can help our students more, right? This is focusing on the right thing. Now, assessment, again, I'm glad people are focusing on assessment, but just focusing on assessment is not going to do it. We're not going to see students learn more. K-12 has taught us that lesson. We need to combine forces and spend a lot of our time strategizing at the program level with curriculum and pedagogy. Okay, so I'm going to summarize. I'm going to summarize with a little story. So it's the story of a coach and an athlete. And so an athlete goes to the coach and she says, I'd like to drop my 100-meter time to 11.5 seconds. And so what the coach says is, let's run some diagnostics. So here's what they find. So her current 100-meter time is 11.82 seconds, so about a third of a second slower than her goal. There's top-of-the-line stopwatches used, multiple timers. They even provide splits for each quarter. So this is like us getting baseline data. Where are students? And so the athlete comes back and says, thanks, what do I do with the results? And the coach says, use them to improve. Now, every one of you who's worked in assessment has probably heard that before or done that, right? You said, hey, use those to improve. Her response is, I'm not sure what to do. So 3 months later, the sprinter comes back to the coach, and she says, my time is the same as 3 months ago, and there's a exclamation point star, dollar sign. That means she's cussing. She's mad. And he says, I know what to do. Let's run more diagnostics. What's happening here? Weigh pig, weigh pig, weigh pig. There's no feeding in there. So let's talk about a better alternative. So after they got that baseline, imagine instead the coach says, let's apply effective strategies for sprinting. And they do a lot of research. They find out what the most effective techniques is. The coach and the sprinter talk a lot, and they say, hey, this is a really good strategy. So after 3 months of intense training with those proven strategies, the coach asks, how is your speed? And her response is this. She's flaming it up. She's going so fast because she actually took advantage of strategies. We can reassess, and let's say she's at 11.4 seconds. So thanks, everybody, for listening. I think Ray is going to open it up to some questions now.
Yes, thank you very much, Keston. That was great. A lot of food for thought, and I'm sure that people out there are agreeing with many of the things you're saying, and also are taking away kind of new ways to be thinking and talking about this on their campuses. So I would encourage you to type in any message or any question or comment that you have in the chat box, and we do have some that are coming in. So Keston, I'll begin with one of these.
Okay.
Someone says, we have faculty wanting to improve their courses, but not the program. We do not have buy-in on the importance of improving a program, and faculty are often too busy teaching in silos and don't realize the value and importance in connecting the courses. Is it a lack of time, or is it a lack of priority on the program and faculty place on their courses, that they place on their courses above the program? So what have been your experiences with that?
Well, first of all, my comment is amen. That's probably the typical situation. First of all, there's a notion out there that faculty don't care much about teaching and learning. That I haven't found to be true. But what that question suggests, I do feel that a lot, that they care a lot about their own individual sections and improving that, but not at the program level. And I think that concept is pretty foreign to a lot of faculty as well. So here's my suggestion. I do not think you should try to do learning improvement with every program at your institution simultaneously. What I think you should do is try to find one program where people get along pretty well, who understand the need to improve at the program level, and try it out with that one program. Get one success story, and once you get that one success story, you can expand out a little bit. And so that's what we found at JMU, that we have one program in particular, computer information systems, are doing an absolutely fantastic job with their learning improvement process. So where they are right now is we spent about a year just defining what their student learning outcome is that they want to work on. We have weighed the pig the first time. We assessed the seniors that just graduated, and now we're putting interventions in place this year. The stories that those faculty tell other faculty are so powerful that now we have a complete our College of Business, a lot of other faculty from other programs to say, hey, can we do that too? So my whole point there is to say, find one good partner, do it the right way, and then word of mouth will start working. But I think you almost have to have that real example first before you can convince other folks to jump on. It's a great question.
Okay, thanks. So another question. If we have faculty that are overloaded and resistant, how do we engage them in making improvements? Not just collecting the data, but actually making improvements. And how do we show them evidence of the value of those improvements?
Yeah, these are all really good questions. So if I understand the question correctly, it's to say faculty are overworked, and you want to show the value of these improvement initiatives.
Right.
I think one of the issues is that too often faculty are engaged in initiatives, and they spend a lot of time on them, and it's unclear whether or not that actually helped out the program. So sometimes I think we do ourselves a disservice because we don't take the time to do it right. And so something that I've worked on recently is I've been trying to be very forthright to say, if you actually want to make a programmatic change, it's going to take a lot of time and a lot of effort. But let's lay this out, and then they can see what the value of it is. Again, going back to my first point, I don't think you want to start out with a whole lot of programs. I think you want to pick one or two, focus on them for a couple years, and then expand out after you get more success. And faculty are pretty data-driven, and that's the point, that if they see one or two great successes from your low-hanging fruit, and you all have low-hanging fruit in your university, some programs that are easy to work with. After they see that success, then you get more of the middle-of-the-road programs to jump on board.
Very good. Okay, so we have some good questions coming in here.
Ray, may I respond to one question you said earlier?
I'm sorry, yes.
Yeah, so somebody chimed in and said, Ray, can we use cows as an example as opposed to pigs? Yeah, absolutely. You can use any animal you want.
Great. So what strategies do you suggest for programs to share their improvements? I think that's an issue we all have on campuses, is they do all the work, and then if they do have improvements, how do you share that? How do you go about sharing those?
Yeah, one thing that I've been doing, I think, better in recent years is I am the loudest cheerleader. So if I find out a program is doing well, then I call up everybody. I call up the dean, and I say, so-and-so program, and name the faculty members have been doing a great job, and you should provide money for them to go out and present at different conferences. They should present in front of other colleagues. I tell the provost about which programs do the best too. And the idea, and sometimes I even ask the provost, I said, Jerry, these guys are doing a great job. Can you actually send them an email and just recognize what a good job they do? And I'm not saying that just recognition is enough to motivate people, but oftentimes it truly does help. One of the things that really can harm a relationship is people do a really great job and nobody acknowledges what they do. So I think acknowledging what people do, and you as an assessment person, if you can go out there and just make sure other people know that story. And our provost, Jerry, could not be happier to reach out via an email or a phone call, because oftentimes he's giving out bad news to people. He's so happy to give good news and congratulations.
Very good. And kind of as a follow-up to that, you've addressed it here, but kind of the question worded differently. Koo and Eikenberry and others make it very clear in their recent publication, Using Evidence of Student Learning to Improve Higher Education, that development and sustainability of meaningful assessment necessitates executive valuing and supporting of assessment work. So can you talk a little bit, and you just did, but maybe you can add to ways in which JMU executive level administrators value and support assessment work?
Yeah, no doubt about it, Ray. Well, a couple comments there. One, they are providing a lot of resources in terms of money. But more important than that, they provide resources in terms of sort of structural support, and they also, in terms of what they say and what they do on campus as well. And so it's not just about giving money to the assessment office, it's also the provost telling the deans and department heads how important it is. So I think those are pieces to it. The other piece that I would say is, you can't build an assessment culture, and especially not a learning improvement culture, overnight. It takes a long time. And one of the problems that I've seen with programs that I work with, institutions I've been at, is that people want to do great assessment in a year, or they want to do great learning improvement projects in a year. What I found is you need to think about that timeline 3 and 5 years out. Is you think that far ahead, then you're much more likely to be successful. And certainly a very important part to that infrastructure is for administration to be on board in terms of, like, let's think this out. Let's think about how much resources the assessment office needs. How can we give our political support to the idea of assessment? And now, again, I'm trying to get, at JMU, I'm really working hard with the administration to sort of change this concept of having this great assessment infrastructure to say, what we really value is to see instances of learning improvement, and they've really been great on that too. So, but yeah, kind of going the other way, if you don't have support from the provost, you don't have support from the president, it's really hard to get things done. And so what we've been able to do is forge great relationships with faculty across campus, plus have that administrative backing. Those two things together over time have allowed a lot of the programs on our campus to do some great work and to evidence it.
Okay, very good. This question is a good one.
Okay.
As well, all of them are good, but this one kind of strikes home from my recent experiences on campus. So many of the folks that we work with in our role as directors of assessment see the assessment report as the end in itself and not really the means to any end, which of course would be improving student learning. So this person says, I see faculty preparing their assessment reports, and the next time they look at it is the next year when it's time to prepare the next report. Do you have any ideas of how to engage faculty in this work on a continuous basis rather than just as part of an annual report?
Yeah, what a great question. And yeah, I've seen that many times at our own institution as well at JMU. And I think where we want to go is for people to think about assessment as being mostly formative as opposed to summative. And so what the person asking this question is saying is that it's basically a one-shot deal. Let me get the report done, and then you sort of forget about assessment until 2 weeks before the next report is done. And so it's maybe reporting some good information, but it's not interacting with the sort of the yearly cycle of what's going on with that that program. So one of the things that we've been working on, Ray, has to do with that 3- and 5-year thinking. And so if the program wants to make a difference, that as opposed to doing assessment and see what's strong and what's weak, and that's where I thought we would go at first, to say, oh yeah, you do an assessment report, you see what's strong and weak, then you immediately follow and spend time the subsequent months working on those things to make your program better. That's not exactly how things go. Now I'm more interested in asking faculty, what do you want to improve at the outset? And then building the assessment structure around that. So let me say that again. So what I used to think assessment would do is people would do great assessment, they would find the strengths and the weaknesses of their program, and then they would work from that. But people don't really respond to results. It's much better, I think, to ask people, what do you want to improve? Give me a good rationale for why you want to improve it. And then they have that motivation to sort of stick with a system that has much more than assessment. I mean, you have to include assessment in that process, but now they're thinking about the pedagogy and the curriculum, and then they're very interested to see subsequent assessments because they're sort of testing a hypothesis. That is, we've changed our curriculum, we've changed our pedagogy, now let's check to see if indeed it's effective. And trust you me, the programs that we piloted with at JMU, they are hungry to see that next assessment report, and they've done all kinds of work in the interim that will have bearing on what those results are.
Okay, very good. So here's a hot question.
Oh, hot. Okay, I like it.
Yeah. We have administrators that want to connect improvement of student learning to faculty evaluations. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, there's two different ways of thinking about it. I think, let me play devil's advocate. In this sense, let me go with the administration here and say, in a way that would be nice. If learning is really improvement, then you should, if improvement is important, then you should evaluate faculty related to that as well. And so, shouldn't faculty getting raises or not getting raises be related to learning improvement? So I get the concept. The problem, Ray, is that it is so hard to do that and do that in a fair way. And I think there's just too many methodological issues with that perspective. And there's plenty of literature in K through 12 where states have been trying to do that, and what they found is it's really hard to conclude that because the students did well in a particular class or did not do well, that variability was due to how good the faculty member was. There are just so many other variables at play. And so I would say conceptually I could see the rationale behind it, but just even with some of the best measurement folks working on this problem in K through 12, whose assessment infrastructure is a lot better, by the way, they haven't been able to do a very good job. So I just don't think that's the way to go right now for higher ed.
Very good. Good answer. Good answer. So, Keston, can you tell us if you, this model of, assessing and reassessing and making sure that improvement's taking place, do you know, besides on your campus, if other institutions have a similar model going on or using this in a different way?
Well, I tell you what I have heard. I've heard of a lot of examples of people working on their own individual sections or even at the course level. There just hasn't been that much work at the program level. The best examples that you can see, if you go to NALEO site, they have some examples of improvement that they highlight. Now, when they're talking about improvement, they often aren't talking about the assess, intervene, reassess all the way. They're oftentimes talking about like logical changes, but still, it's a good start. And Ray, one of the things I'd like to do over the next year is just talk to more campuses. Anybody listening, if you have a great example of learning improvement at the program level at your own institution, I would love to hear about it. I am the easiest person to find on Google, by the way. Just Keston and assessment, you'll find me. Shoot me an email, and I'd love to hear it. But Ray, I don't think there's that many examples out there. One of the things that I think that we can do, you and your group, folks like NALEO, is to really find those examples and help other people see what those examples are.
Okay, very good. And by the way, I'm sitting here thinking, I know in the message that we sent out announcing the webinar that we talked about your NALEO occasional paper. I don't know that we've mentioned it here, but that's one of the links that we will send all of the people who are attending today, is the link directly to Keston's occasional paper that was published by NALEO. And I'm sure probably almost everyone on this call knows who NALEO is and what they do, but if you're not familiar, it's a really, really good place to go looking for great best practices and the great ideas for assessment and improvement of student learning.
Yeah, they've done a really nice job. And Ray, thank you for that shout out for the occasional paper. So today I just talked in broad strokes. The paper goes into a lot more detail. And so if you were thinking about trying learning improvement at your own institution, that paper will give you some more direction than the presentation has done. Okay.
Very good. Well, I don't see any other questions coming in right now. So we can move toward closing out. And Keston, once again, thank you so very much for being here and presenting and having us really think about this important topic. I'd also like to thank Amber Malinowski and Matt Urey, who are my colleagues who are behind the scenes, making all this work, getting all the information out to you. Thank all of you for attending, and please remember that you will have a survey pop up as you're logging off, and we'd love to have your feedback. And be on the lookout for announcements of future webinars we will be hosting in the spring. So everyone, have a great day. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.